Maybe. So the last program was pretty rough. So let's start out with a little levity here on the 7th of August in the year of our Lord 2023. So I've noticed a little bit of a good pop group that's beginning to burgeon here in the United States. They're out of Erie, Pennsylvania. And I'm not going to give you a song of the day. I'm going to give you a group of the week, I guess. So it's the lead singer is a little gal named Audra Miller. And of course, they're from Erie, Pennsylvania. And the name of their group is First to 11th. So if you want to just Google F211, yeah, they're even doing a cover on, I think every Thursday they put a cover out. They just did a cover on Barbie. Turned out to be pretty good, actually. So have a look. They're a real animated group, and if for nothing else, it's fun just to watch Audra kind of bounce. So, all right, yeah, if you want to see a singer that could perhaps have been a cheerleader or something like that in high school, because she is really animated. So, yeah, have a blast with that. Now, let's move on to the news. So this is from our friends at Redacted. Now, I don't always agree with Redacted because they don't see a need for our military being out in the world and protecting our interests outside the United States so much. So we kind of have a variant on ideas there, but beyond that, they try to be very descriptive and honest in their reporting. So there's a new report that suggests NATO is getting ready to throw Ukraine under the bus, or well, in this case, the tank. That was their first blurb on their reporting. The second was the ex-CIA Larry Johnson says Western intelligence are looking for a way to rid themselves of Zelensky and make it look like the Russians did it, maybe a Russian missile attack or something of that nature. So we'll have a little discussion about that here in a second as well. General Kovali, I believe this is out of Ukraine, says that the Russian military has not been degraded at all by the conflict with Ukraine, despite what CNN says. And this is from Natalie at Redacted. She says, how long until the weapons bound for Ukraine wind up in the hands of African countries rising up against France or the United States? So let's talk a little bit about NATO getting ready to throw Ukraine under the bus. Now, we just had the Screaming Eagles, Army Airborne, about 1,200 troops, come into the border with Romania. And we've had a bunch of arms shipments. I'm talking about mid-range armor like Bradley fighting vehicles and Strykers, which are faster wheeled vehicles, a little less armored, coming in sizable numbers. So are we worried about this thing suddenly spilling outside of Ukraine if this thing goes backwards there? I'm not sure. We have reports that there's been some spies apprehended in Poland on the Belarusian border, trying to find out about their military stance and where everything is. This is likely not Russia, by the way. This is likely Wagner sending its probes out, because Russia and Wagner are not always on the same page. And sometimes Russia used Wagner to go out and probe the enemy. We had a situation at the Conoco oil fields in Syria, where Wagner and the Russians were on one side of the river, and the United States was on the other side of the river. And if you remember, this goes all the way back to the people from Iraq, the Kurds, okay? So Russia, being Russia, sends Wagner into the oil fields, right? But they don't know what exactly the U.S. forces' disposition is in the area. Well, what happens is they're headed towards the field and start firing on the oil refinery there, and we had special forces in there. Well, they called on air support, tank support. Anyway, they fought through the night and basically wiped out half the Wagner force. And Russia stood down both their air defense and kept their planes on the ground, because they realized they'd stepped too far, and we'd used the deconfliction telephone to find out that it wasn't the Russians, so we could go ahead and fire on them. So this was Wagner's first day playing with the United States, and according to them, we pushed them around in a merry-go-round of continual automatic weapons fire. Oh, and we blew up all their vehicles. So Wagner has sent out likely spies and probes into Poland, because they're there on the border training. Next, so in Ukraine, they picked up a Ukrainian female national that worked in, I guess, the Odessa area, or right there on the coast, right? And she was trying to get information on disposition of troops, where Zelensky might be, stuff like that. And so they bagged her as a Russian spy. So that tells us that she's either Russian or, and they're trying to move beyond Zelensky. Next, the Russians have gone into a full mobilization, as far as not military mobilization, as far as putting their people into the military, but full mobilization of military manufacturing. So they're doing a whole of government push on manufacturing of weapons. So we're seeing now that the Russian disposition isn't breaking down, and General Kavoli in Ukraine has recognized that. Okay. When we were in Vietnam, we had some problems with leadership. We had people there who were Buddhist, people there who were Christian, and the leadership was having real difficulties. The civilian leadership in Vietnam was having difficulties. And they were also trying to amass more power and put their family, individuals in their family, in more and more powerful positions went through 3 or 4 leaders during that time. And so you can kind of look at this towards that sort of behavior towards perhaps in Ukraine and realize that if that happens, this is a standard operation procedure. Okay, this is not out of the realm of possibility. Next, we have we found under Democratic-led administrations in the United States, they have a propensity to clean up after other European colonizations, let's say like the French War in Vietnam, then we went in afterwards, or we had the Spanish-American War and ended up in the Philippines. We've seen this over time. Okay, so this is kind of a thing we get used to. Also, you know, we ended up in South Korea, kind of the same thing going on, a little different in that it wasn't a prior colony, I believe, but it was a United Nations operation. So, yeah, that's something to keep in mind as we watch this thing in Ukraine going on. Next, this is a question from Natalie at Redacted, and I think this is germane. I want you to think about your family members, not just right there in your home, but cousins, uncles, aunts, the big family, right? When we go to the big family reunions, you know, if we're lucky, we get to see every 5 years, something like that. Are you prepared to send your loved ones into war? So we've got members of Congress, along with some retired military brass, that are pushing the idea of a military draft here in the United States. Now, you have to understand and keep in mind that if they go to draft men and they go before the Supreme Court is not going to be able to defend women from going to the draft. So it's not going to matter if you have children or not, like it has in the past. At least as far as volunteers, they're not really concerned about how many children we have, whether we're male or female. It's our responsibility to ensure that they're cared for while we're gone. But beyond that, they could care less. And you can likely see that being the approach if we go into a draft situation with selective service. So, and then Miss Natalie says, this is the reason we need to stop our imperial aggression. Well, so first of all, we're not imperial. We have lily pads all over the world to keep flashpoints from flaring up, but we don't take territory and hold territory and keep territory. That's just not our bag. We might need to do some nation building and pull out, but we don't take territory and keep territory. We didn't do it with the Germans. We didn't do it with the Japanese. We didn't do it with the Belgians. It's just not what we do. So we're not imperial in that way, but we are a reluctant superpower. And by keeping wars down out there, keeps us from having wars here. Now, do you want your children involved with this? That's a whole different story. And Bill Williams' view on this, and I do have a certain view. I like well, let's just go on to the draft part first. In Vietnam, we had the draft, and we found some things that were not a really good outcome with draftees. Okay, so the draftees that went in the Marine Corps, we didn't have much of a problem with them because they're raised to a certain amount of aggression. All right, so they weren't much of a problem in Vietnam. They functioned really well, and most of the sailors were good at fighting, especially the Riverines and folks like that, because they knew they had quick reaction forces on the carriers and the boats nearby. So they had quick reaction air support. So they weren't so timid about going into action. The Air Force, because of the strategic forces and whatnot, tended to get the best talent, tended to get the folks with the highest IQs, and have to fill in the fewest amount of positions with conscripts. So they did pretty well. But the Army had some problems. Okay, and we had three groups, really, from my perspective, that happened in the Army. Okay, so that was a mixed bag. So we had, a group that would fight for the flag in the Army. They were stand-up folks. They're going to do their job, even if they've got conscripted. They were there to finish the job and get home. Okay, so they're going to fight for the flag. Then you got some that would fight to survive. They would keep their brother next to them alive so they could survive. All right, and they would fight that way. And then they had, some refuseniks. And these are folks that are just, we're not going to do it. Sure, fine. If you want us to take care of base maintenance, if you want us to do food services, whatever, we're not going to pick up a gun. We're not going to shoot at the enemy. Don't care if we get overrun. We're just not into that. So they had that group. The dangerous one was the group that were willing to fight to survive, because they were wild cards. They were in the fight, but they might not be in the fight for you necessarily. And they could get dangerous. So I would rather that we don't have conscripts at all, that we have, your number come up and you're drug into the military forces, and they decide where you go, what you're going to do, what your IQ is, what your propensities are, how they can best use you. I would like to see personally more of the Israeli model, where everybody goes into service. If we all serve the country, we'll all have skin in the game, right? If everybody of a certain age has to enter the service of the country, I'm not saying it has to be military service. I'm just saying they have to serve somebody beyond themselves. They have to be engaged with the world. They have to be engaged with society. They can't just be in their own world and not concerned about how the country functions, because now they're suddenly pushed into that's the way to go. You know, I would rather not have any sort of conscription. We found out in Desert Storm that volunteers were much more effective. We had folks that were invested, wanted to be there, all had high school graduates. They were all brought up to at least, all the fighting forces brought up to like a 2-year community college level in the service. And, you know, not only were they well motivated, but they were fed. We took care of our troops. And the outcome was obvious. If the commander needed us to get something done, we got it done. We found a way. So, yeah, you want the Vietnam model under the Democrats or more of the Desert Storm model under Republicans? And don't get me wrong, both presidents of both parties were horrors. Seriously. So, okay, that's information that needs to be out there. You all need to be thinking about that because it matters. This is a little more disturbing out of Ukraine. According to Redacted, they say, so while we're focused on the war, are there nefarious things happening in Ukraine? Recent reports have emerged from the country of Ukraine over the past few weeks, okay, of women being kept in underground bunkers. So that alone is disturbing. But here's where things get off the rails. They believe companies are making billions off from a baby farming industry going on in Ukraine. These are Slavic. They tend to be white. They tend to be attractive. And their babies are in high demand. And what's demand? So we've always had the folks with the lack of fertility, right? And infertility is going up in the world. It's not going down. You've got our LGBT friends, and they tend to need to adopt, right? And then we've got the old child abuse industry. Use them for work, sex slaves, and then we've got the real evil part where they like to use them for human sacrifices. There's a group of folks out there that enjoy that. So you got to keep in mind, the money we're sending in Ukraine is going into a society that is just 30 years out from independence. And communism is the biggest thug society that there ever is. Everything's a racket. And so what you're seeing right now in Ukraine is, to a degree, fallout of the old communist ideas and the old Nazi ideas. Remember Lebensborn. Create their super soldier program through birthing. So, yeah. Okay. It turns out, next blurb I saw, that I think this was out of CNN or somebody like that. is leading Biden by a total of 2 points in Michigan. And what does that mean? So I'm going to take a little guess here. You know, William's humor tends to be rather sardonic, shall we say. Anyhow, I think the reason why there's a 2-point spread is because either the poll is crap, or, you know, the people of Michigan are brain dead. Moving on. Please don't be brain dead, Michigan. Okay. I don't know how Biden would get a vote. Anyway, it's beyond me. I want a president who can put together like 3 ideas at a time. We had a little bit of a blowout in New York City. There at Union Square. Turns out this Twitch streamer named Kai decided that he was going to, I don't know, share some of the profits he's made or give something away, and oh my gosh, a whole riot started in New York, and it was all about, you know, a Twitch streamer, and it just cracks me up. So this is kind of one of those things that Kai may have stepped in Darwin work territory, meaning that what he did may be self-defeating to a degree. Just because you can do something doesn't always mean you should do something. We've seen this in science, and now we're seeing this in Twitch. So I noticed that most of our fine rioters were military-age men. And the very vast majority had very dark brown hair, black hair, and, you know, it's summer, everybody has tans, but what do you think that might mean? Okay, moving on from New York. This is big. I don't know if you guys have heard of Natalie Winters on the War Room program, but if she's interested in an old guy, I'm pretty sure I could tolerate it. Just saying, Natalie. Okay, moving on. So she's, you know, intelligence is sexy as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, moving on. There's a big military story coming out from her. She's found financial links to the White House and Hunter Biden on drawing down of the U.S. Strategic National Oil Reserve for profit. Now, this is beyond making money out in the public sphere. This is directly taking from our military's ability to project themselves in the world. That stockpile is there for our military to be able to fuel our ships and our aircraft. It's a big, big deal. And what is this going to mean for, we'll just call it our primary contest? Are we going to have bad fallout from that for our folks that are out there on the trail? The other thing is, while we're so involved and looking so intently at the politics going on, we need to really keep an eyeball on what's going on in Congress and what's going on you do is you go out and you set up a perimeter. You set up a security perimeter. You have somebody that's watching your back. You're watching the front. You've got sight positions. When you consider the news sources and information and politics, think like that. Look in all directions. Don't put your guard down. Okay. Well, Ellie, did you hear about what happened in Alaska? I don't know if Ellie's with me right now. Anyway, we had a major incursion into the Aleutian Islands. We had 11 Chinese and Russian warships outside U.S. territorial waters in the Aleutians. Now, it raised concerns. And we have to keep in mind that if you go to the difference between little Diomede and big Diomede, that's Russia and the United States, it's only 12 miles difference between the two in the Aleutians. So the United States and Russia share, some territorial waters there. But what's different is the Chinese ships with the Russian ships. So this is not just China, this is also language about how the Chinese-Russian compact of mutual interests are being played out. And so this is a language and, a little bit of a push against the United States. Now, they were involved also in joint exercises. And, of course, what they want to do initially is menacing, right? They want to be menacing. And why do they want to do that? They want to push towards destabilization. So, what do ships have? I want you all to think about this. What do ships have that aircraft don't? So we've had bombers come our way with fighter aircraft with them that we've, sent out of our identification zone. But what is it the ships have that aircraft tend to not have? They have the capacity to move heavy armor and offload large groups of people quickly. And they were near U.S. territory. So that's a big deal. So the Navy took serious notice. Of course, the Air Force had already responded. And we're sending 4, not 2, not 3, but 4 full-on Navy destroyers into the Aleutians right now. That hasn't happened for a while. So let's keep an eye on that. That's important. Moving down the coast, let's move down to California. We had some contract flyers flying a Sikorsky air crane, and I believe it was a Bell helicopter. Both expense birds. These are not low money birds. And one was Cal Fire, and the other was, of course, Contractor, and they did a mid-air collision yesterday, and I believe the bell was lost, and 3 operators were killed from Cal Fire. The Sikorsky managed to land with its crew. It's a heavy lift aircraft. So, my thoughts on this is Okay, you've got a brush fire. Yeah, it's starting to move quickly. It's not in the easiest of terrain. Where is the air boss? You should always have somebody doing air traffic control flying above in like a Cessna, an airplane that can loiter and direct in the air attacks and direct the folks that are coming through the air attacks out at certain vectors so that they're not incurring each other when they're trying to fight a fire. Just want California to think about, where's your air boss? You just killed 3 pilots. Okay, moving to the South China Sea, we've had some interesting actions by the Chinese Coast Guard outside of their territorial waters. They've decided to water cannon Philippine resupply ships navigating in the South China Sea. Both should be in freedom of navigation areas, but the Chinese have decided, they have their special pumped up islands. And, when your enemy acts, you have to react. There's really no choice, because that gives you, an enemy in any situation writes the rules of conduct in any engagement. So the Philippines, they're smart to have somebody out there on the islands and resupplying them, just like the Chinese. Why? Because if you're doing what the Chinese are doing, it's the best way to keep eyes and information on each other, keep track of each other, and keep things from spinning out of control. But Chinese Coast Guard, of course, doesn't see it that way, and they tried to drown one of the smaller ships with water cannons. So another aggressive action by the Chinese Coast Guard outside of their waters, violating international law. Now, you've heard probably of Crux, C-R-U-X, on YouTube and whatnot, do reporting. So according to Crux, out of Syria, they say that Syria was able to shoot down some Israeli missiles, which Syria thought was a good thing, but they lost 4 Syrian soldiers in the rocket attack from Israel, and Israel pounded on a bunch of areas. I guess you'd call it just northwest of or northwest-west of Damascus. And, of course, they were targeting our nefarious little helpers from Iran. So that wasn't a good deal. At the same time, on the West Bank, we've got resistance intensifying between Israel and Palestinians, according to IWON, W-I-O-N, out of India. Also, the United States is sending hundreds of U.S. military now into the Middle East region. Now, I don't know exactly where they're going. They could be going to the Persian Gulf. I don't know. But we're sending some folks in, probably to our lily pads. I know that we've had some problems with tankers being boarded by Iranian craft, and we may be putting Marines on tankers here a little bit. So we'll see how that goes. The next is we have some real tensions boiling up in Israel over Iran's possible ability to field a nuclear warhead soon. So that's not gone away. That's increasing. And with U.S. forces more in the region, how is that going to play out? Don't have a crystal ball. Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel wants to be the world leader in artificial intelligence. So they're now making a big push and a big investment. And hey, they have a history. They were doing a lot of the modeling and architecture work for Intel chip manufacturers. So if you've had an Intel chip in your computer in the last, 10 or 15, 20 years, chances are that architecture was worked out in a place like Tel Aviv. All right, where am I now? I got to go through my papers real quick, see if I missed anything. Now, I've been learning something from the Special Forces. They say it's better to be slow and smooth than quick and jerky. So I've been trying to apply that to my reporting and trying to actually being able to read my own chicken scratch. And I don't know, maybe a little bit. It could be happening. I lost us, I'm sorry. I hope that didn't hurt your ears. Yeah, that's my report for today. I wish I could have taken up a little more time, but frankly, that was the most germane information that I had. I could have gone into a bunch of politics, but I tried to avoid that, as I'm not sure it helps in our subscribership on the program. So, Ellie, this is the end of the program, and I'd like to thank you all for listening in and picking up some of the news of the weekend and the day, and I hope you have a good day, and we'll see you here tomorrow, and I hope to also see you on the World War III report. So thank you for being with us wherever you find yourself in the world, and we hope that this reporting has been fair, honest, and semi-complete. We try to do our best, and that's what we have for you today. Thank you for tuning in. God bless. Please spend time with your families and enjoy it.
All right, William. Thank you much.